Yo, what's up, my fellow immortals, and welcome back to Holy Ground Gaming. I'm your host, Russell Nash, and this is the #1 spot for Highlander the Card Game. This video is going to be a remake of a video that I did about 3 years ago. And when I made that video, I really wasn't that great at editing and, figuring out that entire process. So I figured since then, over those 3 years, I've gotten better at the editing process. I can now make better content for you guys. So this is a video that I've been wanting to do for a while, and I really hope you guys are excited for this. This video is really going to be for people who don't know how to play, and that's really what this video is. It's a how to play Highlander the Card Game. So we're going to go over exactly what the steps are and what it takes to actually play this game. So I can't wait for this. It's going to be fun. I'm excited. So if you're a new player and you're trying to get into this game but you don't know how to play, you can use this video and learn how to play the game. So without further ado, let's jump right in and learn how to play Highlander the Card Game. So Highlander is designed to be played as a duel to the death between two immortals who are struggling to reach the time of the gathering. Think of each duel as a battle that spans across many years, even centuries. And think of the support cards just like a warrior would use his or her surroundings to their benefit in a battle. Both players are going to need their own 50-card deck. You can include up to 6 copies of each card in your deck unless it's specifically restricted to a certain number. In Highlander, your deck is known as your endurance. Players can take a certain amount of damage before they lose the game. In Highlander, your life is known as your ability. Each player is going to start the game with 15 ability or life. When you take damage from an attack in Highlander, your ability or your life is reduced by the amount of damage that you took. For example, if I take 2 damage, my ability or my life is reduced by 2. Now keep in mind that your hand size is directly affected by what your current ability is. Now you can only hold in your hand the amount of cards that reflect what your current ability is, and you can only draw up to what your current ability is, or your life. So for example, if my current ability is 10, I can only hold 10 cards in my hand, or I can only draw up to 10 cards. Once you start taking damage, you will notice fewer and fewer cards in your hand, severely limiting your options for attack and defense. So when you draw the last card of your endurance or your deck, you become exhausted. You do not lose the game when you become exhausted. When you become exhausted, you're going to lose 5 ability. You're going to reshuffle your deck and you're going to continue to play. The goal of Highlander is to knock your opponent's ability to 0 or to land a successful headshot. A headshot is a modified upper attack, and if it's successful, the game is over, no matter what your opponent's current ability is. So don't lose your heads out there. To begin the game and see who goes first, both players are going to choose an attribute of their choice. Now, what is an attribute? Attributes consist of things like agility, strength, toughness, empathy, and reason. Each immortal has a certain amount of those attributes that they can include in their deck. After you've chosen that attribute, you're going to make a soft exertion for your chosen attribute. Now, to make a soft exertion, you're going to reveal the top 5 cards from your endurance or your deck, and you're going to count how many of your chosen attribute are found in that soft exertion. So let's say, for example, I choose agility and my opponent chooses strength. I'll reveal the top 5 cards and I'll count how many agility attributes I found within those 5 cards. If my number is greater than my opponent's, I'm going to go first. After you've made your soft exertion and you've determined who's going to go first, you're going to take those 5 cards and place them on the bottom of your endurance or your deck. Now we know who's going to go first. Each player is going to draw their opening hand. You're going to draw your opening hand based on what your current ability is, which is 15. So you will then draw 15 cards. Remember, in Highlander, there is no mulligans, so you're not going to be able to discard any cards and redraw. What you see in your opening hand is what you get. Something to be aware of when playing Highlander is normally on your opponent's turn, you do not perform any actions unless a card specifically says that you do so. So, when your opponent plays a card requiring you to perform a certain action, you're going to wait until your turn to do that. Now, this is going to bring us to the first phase of the game, and it is called Sweep Phase. This is where you are sweeping the cards that you played in the previous turn to your discard pile. Think of your discard pile kind of like your graveyard, and you're sweeping the board of cards that have already been played to make room for your next turn. At the start of the game, neither player will have any cards in play that needs to be swept, so you can go ahead and move past this phase at the very beginning of the game. The second phase of the game is called the may-do, must-do phase. This is where you or your opponent have to follow all the stipulations that have been laid out by you or your opponent on your previous turn. I'm going to give you a couple examples of some must-do actions and some may-do actions. An example of a may-do action would be something like your opponent may not play a defense card from their hand during their turn. An example of a must-do effect would be something like your opponent must discard a dodge to play a dodge from their hand. These are just two examples of the many cards that dictate the must-do, may-do actions. Remember, must-do effects must be satisfied before may-do effects, so keep that in mind. The third phase is called Defense Phase. Now, this is where you're going to play your defense cards in the hopes of defending yourself from your opponent's attacks. Now, you can play one defense for each attack coming at you. If your opponent played multiple attacks and one defense will block or dodge all of the attacks, you have successfully defended yourself from those attacks. Now, some attacks or cards will dictate that one defense will not block or avoid multiple attacks, such as one block or one dodge. This is where playing multiple defenses needs to happen. Now remember, the attacks have to be defended in the order that they were played. So after you have successfully defended yourself or not, you're going to move on to the next phase of the game. So the fourth phase of the game is known as the attack phase. Normally, you have one attack opportunity per turn, unless a card or a weapon you're using dictates that you can play multiple attacks. Now, if your opponent has a card or an effect in play that is going to restrict you from playing attacks during your attack phase, you cannot attack. Now, speaking of attacking, remember that in Highlander, if you play a successful block during your defense phase, you cannot attack to any areas that you blocked last turn. If you choose to dodge that attack, however, you may attack freely to any areas. So after your attack phase, you're going to move on to the fifth phase of the game, known as the ability adjustment phase. Once you reach the ability adjustment phase, you can no longer play any cards. This phase of the game is where you would adjust your ability equal to the amount of damage or ability lost or gained during your turn. So for example, if I was at 15 ability during my turn and I took 2 damage from an attack, this phase of the game is where I would adjust my ability or my life to reflect the amount of damage that I took. So after your ability adjustment phase, you're going to reach the final phase of the game, and it's called the draw or discard phase. If you reach this phase and you have more or less cards in your hand than what your current ability is, you're either going to draw up to or discard down to what your current ability is. So remember, in Highlander, you do not have to draw up to what your current ability is if your endurance or your life is getting low, but you do have to discard down to what your current ability is. Remember that your hand size is directly related to what your current ability is. Both players are going to repeat this cycle until the end of the game. Now, let's talk about some game mechanics. First, let's discuss what a hard exertion is. Think of making an exertion like you're exerting some power from your endurance or your deck. So to make a hard exertion, you're going to reveal the top 5 cards of your endurance, and any cards that are not used from that exertion are then going to be placed in your discard pile or your graveyard. So you can only play attacks, illusions, and defenses from exertions. Keep in mind that you cannot play a special attack from an exertion. Normally, you can only make one hard exertion per turn in either your defense phase or your attack phase, and for one specific reason. Keep in mind that once you make that hard exertion in whichever phase that you're in, it's going to end that phase and you'll no longer be able to play cards in that phase of the game. I'm going to give you a couple examples of needing to make a hard exertion and how to do so. The first example of needing to make a hard exertion would be that you don't have a defense card in your hand to defend yourself against one of your opponent's attacks that are coming at you. So if that's the case, what you're going to do is you're going to tell your opponent in your defense phase, I'm going to make a hard exertion for a defense. Then you're going to reveal the top 5 cards in that exertion from the top of your endurance in the hopes of finding a successful defense to defend yourself against that attack. If you happen to find a dodge or a block that can defend that attack, you're going to play it from the exertion. And the other 4 cards that are found in the exertion are going to go to your discard pile. The second example of making a hard exertion would be that you don't have an attack in your hand during your attack phase. So you're going to tell your opponent, hey, I'm going to make a hard exertion for an attack. You're going to repeat the same process, reveal the top 5 cards from your endurance in the hopes of finding an attack to play to attack your opponent. Now remember, you cannot play any special attacks from an exertion. Now, if you make an exertion and you don't find a card that you're looking for, all 5 of those cards made from your hard exertion are going to go in your discard pile, so be careful. The third example of making an exertion would be just to make an exertion. In Highlander, you have to do something on your turn. You cannot simply pass to your opponent. So you either have to play a special card or you have to make an exertion. So in this case, I would just tell my opponent, I'm going to make an exertion to make an exertion. So I'd reveal the top 5 cards of my endurance or my deck, and I'd place all 5 of those cards into my discard pile. That's going to satisfy the stipulation of you doing something on your turn. All right, now let's talk about the different attacks and defenses that can be found in Highlander. There are basic attacks, basic blocks, and special attacks, as well as dodges. Basic attacks normally do 2 damage. Special attacks are going to have some sort of stipulation that your opponent has to follow. For example, this attack cannot be blocked. Now, let's talk about one of the coolest mechanics that you can find in Highlander the card game, and that is the power blow mechanic. And it is essentially exactly what it sounds like. It is a more powerful attack or defense. Now, power blows are going to be doing an additional 2 damage for a total of 4 damage. Making a power blow or a power block requires an exertion. Now, there are some cards that allow you to make a power blow or a power block without making an exertion, but normally you're going to need to perform an exertion to make one of your attacks a power blow or a power block. I'm going to give you an example of making a power blow on my turn. So for instance, I want to make one of my basic attacks a power blow. I'm going to play that attack and I'm going to tell my opponent, hey, I'm going to make a hard exertion to make that basic attack a power blow. So I take the top 5 cards of my endurance, I reveal them, and then I place those cards into my discard pile. The act of making that exertion is what is going to turn your basic attack into a power blow. Let me give you an example of making a power block. Let's say on my opponent's turn, they make a power blow against me. During my defense phase, I'm going to play the correct block against that power blow. Now, I'm going to tell my opponent, hey, I'm going to make a hard exertion to make that a power block. Top 5 cards of the top of my endurance go to my discard pile, and that is what is going to turn my block into a power block to stop that power blow. The cards that are being discarded from my exertion is the price that I'm paying to make my attack more powerful or to make my block more powerful. Now, let's say my opponent plays a power blow against me, and I choose not to make a power block. So I play the correct block from my hand, and I tell my opponent I'm not going to power block. By not power blocking that power blow, you're going to take 2 damage instead of 4. So remember, there is a price to pay when not power blocking. Let me give you a quick example of something that happens a lot with new players when they're making an exertion for a power blow or a power block or just to find a defense. Let's say, for example, on my opponent's turn, they make a power blow against me. So it comes to me, and during my defense phase, I tell my opponent, I'm going to make an exertion for a defense. So I make that exertion for a defense, and I happen to find a block that works. I'm going to play that block from the exertion. But because the exertion was meant for a defense and not a power block, I'm going to end up taking 2 damage. Just because you make an exertion for a defense doesn't mean that it's automatically a power block, so keep that in mind. One thing to keep in mind in Highlander is that if your opponent makes a power blow at you on their turn, your first attack on your turn may be played hidden, but special attacks cannot be played hidden, so remember that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the support cards that you can find in Highlander. The support cards are going to include locations, situations, events, objects, plots, and edge cards. Locations, situations, plots, events, and objects are considered special cards. You can only play one special card per turn in either your defense phase or your attack phase. Edge cards do not count as special cards, and you can play as many edge cards per your turn as you can and in any phase. Speaking about locations as a special card, you can only have one location in play at a time. So for example, on my turn, I play my location, and then on my opponent's turn, they play a location. My location is immediately put into my discard pile. You can only have one in play at a time, just like you can only be in one place at any given time. Cards like locations, situations, objects, and plots are going to remain in play until you or your opponent removes them from play. Over the course of the battle, you and your opponent are going to be using attacks and defenses and support cards to win the game. It's important to know that in your deck of 50 cards, you have to have a total of 9 of the different basic attacks and 6 of the different basic blocks in your deck for it to be legal. Highlander is a brutal and unforgiving game meant to simulate a duel and a battle between two immortals who are trying to be the last. Be sure to build your deck with an adequate amount of attacks, defenses, and support cards to help you win the game. You've got different locations, situations, plots, events, and edge cards that you can use to your advantage to try to put your opponent right where you want them, and hopefully you can take their head. Well guys, we reached the end of the video. I truly hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that it was informational. I hope that you learned how to play the game. If you're confused on any different phases of the game, just go back and watch it from the beginning, and I guarantee you, you're going to get more comfortable in learning how to play Highlander. Consider becoming an immortal today and hitting that subscribe button. We are on the road to 500 immortals or 500 subscribers. If you liked this video, please leave it a thumbs up. If you hated this video, leave it a thumbs down. Tell me down in the comments what kind of stuff you guys want to see next. Be on the lookout for that next video. Don't lose your heads out there, and remember, there can be only one collectible card game.